Love and Thunder tells the story of, you guessed it, Thor, who enlists the help of his friends, Korg, Valkyrie, and ex-girlfriend Jane Foster in an attempt to fight Gorr, the God Butcher. Welcome back, guys, and thank you so much for clicking this video. I really do appreciate that. Yes, we have another MCU film in Thor, Love and Thunder, the 29th in the series. Minus Venom and Morbius. I hadn't quite considered them MCU material, not just yet. Even though they showed in-credit scenes that there's just, to me, aren't on par with the MCU just yet, so it's going to take me some time for those. But with Thor, Love and Thunder, I accepted nothing less or nothing more. It's an MCU. We've already adapted to all of its quirks and all of its pleasures. That is the MCU. So by now, probably like 10 movies ago, or maybe even 15 movies ago, it's pretty much set its ways. So I got things to say. It wasn't great, but it wasn't terrible. So with that being said, let's start in with the positives as usual for Thor, Love and Thunder. The effects, it was pretty amazing. It was pretty good. I liked the way the movie looked and the way the movie was shot. Again, I didn't expect anything less, especially from a Thor movie. And at this point of the MCU's long-running state, it didn't disappoint. It looked amazing. It was some cool special effects, especially with the lightning and the way the new Asgard looked, and much of this deep space scenes as well. And it's funny that there's actually a black and white scene. It was a nice transition. They go to this Earth that just turns everything black and white. And it was like, for a second there, I thought I was watching like something from the 60s. And it looked pretty cool. And like whenever Jane would light up the hammer, you could see the color would come back. The way the cinematography looked, you could see the light shining on her face. You could see the color come back. It's kind of like a Wizard of Oz situation, just about, but like with mixed in color. I shouldn't say that. More of a Sin City vibe. Yeah, because the way that particular scene looked in the second act, it was actually pretty cool. You know, the special effects, yeah, aces. And the story was pretty solid. Basically, you got this villain called Gorr the God Butcher. His name is pretty self-explanatory. He suffers a great tragedy and is hell-bent on vengeance. Vows to kill every Valkyrie god out there. It was actually pretty good. With Thor teams up with his friends, with Valkyrie and Korg and his ex-girlfriend Jane, to take him out, to take him down. It's not something we haven't seen a million times before, but it still works. And it was made for a fun time. It really was. And the direction was pretty good. A lot of people were actually worried that this movie was going to take away from Thor because of the whole Jane thing. Let me assure you, it does not take away from Thor. It's really both of their movies. It's both Thor and Jane's movie. Especially if you watch the whole entire thing through, you'll definitely think, okay, thank God. Because if it did take away from Thor, believe me, I wouldn't even be mentioned in this part of the review. But it was actually pretty good. It's like I said, it's both of their movies. You know, especially if you're going to bring Jane back, since she's the Dark World. Thor the Dark World back in 2013. We hadn't seen her since then. So it was a nice transition to bring her back. And the characters is great. Of course, Chris Hemsworth returns, and he definitely did bring the thunder, no pun intended. Natalie Portman was great as Jane, and I loved how they fleshed out Jane and Thor's relationship. They talk about it here and there in the first two films, or in the first three films, but, well, mainly in the first two films when she actually showed up. She was absent in Ragnarok, of course, but I liked how they fleshed their relationship out for this one, for Thor Love and Thunder. I liked how they basically just went for it, and it was very touching. Without giving too much away, there was definitely a heartfelt moment, you know, especially the way it ends. It's again, I'm not going to give anything away. This is a spoiler-free review, as all of my reviews are, but it was very touching, and I liked that aspect. It was nice to see their relationship unfold even more. and showed what happened in between, why you hadn't seen her for so long. And it was very touching. But again, I like the way they fleshed out their relationship. It was just nice to see. It was a nice bit of info that this movie really needed. It really needed. And Christian Bale is the badass villain, is Gorr the God Butcher. As I said, he suffers a tragic loss, and he just, you feel for this guy. There's a legit, well, I mean, not in every person's eyes. I wouldn't go killing anybody just because a tragedy happened in my life. That's a villain for you. And Christian Bale played it out pretty well. This actor can do no wrong. I mean, he was good as Batman, and now he's playing a villain. So it's like, he can do no wrong. He was excellent as this character. And I really did feel for him, and I really did cheer for him in some spots because of how badass he was. But at the same time, again, you feel for this character. Again, watch the movie. You'll understand what I'm talking about. But he was pretty cool. He just brought such sorrow and angst to the character that you feel for him. And also you got Tessa Thompson as Valkyrie. She definitely held her own. Especially like the way she looked in her Valkyrie costume. It was pretty badass. I really did like her. The film was pretty enjoyable. Don't get me wrong here, but it's got to be said, and this is something that the MCU is really bad at doing. The humor, which is my first negative of this. Oh my god, it was kind of unbearable. It was a little too campy. Now the MCU, I've always been back and forth with the humor. Some of them is kind of rough, and some of them is kind of, okay. But with Thor Love and Thunder, with the humor and the jokes, it was just smeared all through it. Almost to the point to where I couldn't really enjoy what was going on in the story. You would see a scene that's supposed to be serious, but right before that, there was jokes just smeared all through it. And even in these scenes that was supposed to be serious, they still threw in jokes. It seems like Taika Waititi did have a little bit more of a hand of this project. It's like the producers said, go nuts. And I think that was their first mistake. When he did Thor Ragnarok, it seemed like it balanced out better. But with Thor Love and Thunder, you see his brain and humor and his style all through this. And it just never seemed to know when to quit. And it just made it kind of unbearable to watch. Like I said, you couldn't get into the story. You couldn't get into the scenes that are serious because just before that you get a joke. You don't know when to laugh or when to actually be serious. You don't know how to feel for anything. You don't have that feeling that you're supposed to have when something serious is going on. And that's the major downfall with this film. The humor and the jokes, it was just too heavy. They upped it up to like a 10 to where you couldn't enjoy the story of what was actually going on. And if that's not bad enough, they have these goats in here that just does nothing but scream. You don't hear you just hear bah, bah, every freaking 10 to 15, 20 minutes. And this is a 2-hour movie. So if you're not already annoyed by the jokes and all the other stuff I just mentioned, just add on to that sanity. Not to mention you get this one joke where you have this love triangle or tangle between the original Hammer and Stormbreaker from Infinity War, to where it gets jealous of Thor's interest in the original Hammer once he finds out that Jane has it. And that didn't really land for me. Again, the jokes just piled on, and it just didn't give itself enough time to breathe. And because of that, jokes like that probably would have been better if it wasn't so much added on. Yeah. The action suffered for it. It just didn't really help the movie at all. Compared to Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, that's why that one worked, because that one knew how to balance it out. It balanced out the humor so much better in that film. They really didn't have to up it up in this film. I'm sorry, it just didn't work out for me at all. Maybe I'll have a better experience the second time around, but as of now, no. It just wasn't that enjoyable for me, especially with all the humor. This felt like a parody instead of a Thor film. It felt like a parody of a Thor movie within a Thor movie. If you were to say, maybe Keenan Ivory Wayans was to do this, or any of the Zucker brothers, and if Leslie Nielsen was still around and was a little younger, he could play Thor, and that would be your Naked Gun Thor movie, or whatever. I would believe that more, because that's how much the jokes really weighed on. It didn't really feel like so much of a serious Thor movie than a parody, which made Thor, the character itself, kind of really watered down. Like in the beginning, he was this almighty, powerful god. And everything he went through in Avengers, which is much darker, especially in Infinity War and Endgame, they really watered him down, especially for Thor Love and Thunder. It's kind of sad.
Well, you're right.
And as I said, with Christian Bale's Gorr the God Butcher, as awesome and kick-ass as he was, as much as I enjoyed him, I felt like there was no real place for this character in this movie. It didn't feel like he had like that much of a purpose except for going around and killing all these gods. If you were to say that, hey, he's coming out with a separate movie, and you watch him in that, then that would have been more plausible. But in Thor Love and Thunder, I just don't feel like his place was all that necessary. He didn't have this grander plan like Thanos did or any of the other MCU villains. Christian Bale, he played a great villain in this, but I just don't feel like his plan was all that grand. It just wasn't that noticeable. It didn't have that much of a place, of a purpose, if you get my drift. It's kind of weird having two Thors. Like with the whole Jane backstory on how she got the powers, it just felt like that they kind of wrote stuff in with no explanation. You know, all logic just goes out the window. She has this sickness, so she goes to where the broken hammer was placed, the one that Thor's sister pretty much destroyed in Ragnarok. So she manages to find that, and then the next thing you know, oh, okay, she's the female Thor. Okay, are we going to ignore how she did that? Apparently so. But it wasn't as badass. You know, having two Thors, it just didn't really do anything for me. Now, unlike with Spider-Man No Way Home that came out last year, where you had all three of the Peter Parkers in one, that was badass. That was awesome. They wrote that in a way to where it was interesting. But with Thor Love and Thunder, with the whole Jane character being the second Thor, I just didn't really feel like it was necessary. It didn't really do anything for me. I didn't really feel like that was necessary. It didn't spark any interest. Plus the fact that getting Thor's powers didn't cure her sickness at all, so that was kind of mute. So again, it just didn't really make sense.
Jane?
But all in all, guys, Thor Love and Thunder was pretty enjoyable. I'm sure any loyal MCU fan would still appreciate it. I mean, why stop now? You'd still welcome this film with open arms, especially if you stuck through the MCU from the beginning. But it's a decent time. Just temper your expectations just a hair and go on the fence. So Thor, Love and Thunder, what was your thoughts on it? Were you a fan? Did you find this to be the most enjoyable out of the MCU films or the Thor films in general? Or do you feel as though it's lost its thunder? Leave me your comment down below and give me your thoughts. Thank you so much, guys, once again for watching this video. I really do appreciate it. Like, subscribe, comment, and share, the big four. And I will see you on the next one. Peace.